Yeah, so we are honored to have Slavoj Žižek on our opening here. Good old comrade of Krytyka Polityczna.
Don't mention age, I was 62 months ago. So.
Yeah, that's true. We will start with a spontaneous lecture, and then we will see what to do. Probably we'll end with some democracy on the public and some questions. So, Professor Žižek, the floor is yours.
Sorry. I hope this works. Okay. Thank you very much. First, let me tell you that I'm really, not just a formality, proud to be here for the obvious snobbish European, all European reasons for which you must know them in advance and are bored to death by them, you know. 20 years ago you were, as they put it in Star Wars, the center of the known universe, you know. And I think this poses a serious problem. You know, your friend, mine also, Timothy Garton Ash, who is, I met him a couple of days ago in London, and he seems transfixed onto that moment 20 years ago, as if basically his message, I was told when he visited Poland now, maybe he's even still here, was, you should be so happy, you have a great time, you and the Czechs, you did the great thing, and so on and so on. I just think that we shouldn't be transfixed onto that moment. We should ask the obvious questions, which are, where are we now 20 years later? How does it stand with it? And I would like to begin with just a simple, clear confrontation. People went into, or triggered, the events 20 years ago and earlier, of course, with a certain vision, which is, okay, best embodied in the slogan solidarity. Where are we now today with regard to that? The first obvious constatation, and please, let's not start the boring polemics again, the usual one against me. I don't imply with this any nostalgia for old communism, but it's an obvious fact that, how should I put it, people didn't get what they wanted. In what sense? Of course they wanted democracy, freedom, and so on, but if you look closely at the program, solidarity, and so on, it wasn't specifically just personal freedoms plus capitalism. It was, I claim, some kind of a more, as far as I can judge from my memories, I'm sure you know better, more general, how should I put it, almost half spontaneous demand for, of course, a free society, but at the same time in a free society where you can live, not being forced in order to survive, to make moral compromises with certain dignity, honesty, and not last but not least, as they put it, solidarity. In very vague terms, to put this. Now, when people here and elsewhere express their dissatisfaction with what you have now, and I don't mean to avoid again any misunderstanding, this boring, you know, always in the West, those patronizing, pseudo-sympathetic journalists who want to emphasize how really backward are we in post-communist countries, like as a sign of our immaturity, point always to the same result of those stupid opinion polls. Oh, do you know that in Poland or there or I don't know where, over 20% of the people still think before the life was better and so on. I wouldn't take this seriously. I claim that, you know, this is more a kind of a, even with those 20%, I claim that if you were to tell them, listen, as they put it in English, cut the bullshit. Imagine really those times here again. Would you really like to return? I can guarantee you that 9 out of the 10 would not. But nonetheless, there is a certain dissatisfaction. And the big problem for me is to put it in very simple terms. How do we read that dissatisfaction? First, we have the patronizing Western liberal, I underline Western, answer, which is, again, a very arrogant one. The immaturity of us East Europeans. We had crazy ideas that capitalism means just, you know, you get everything from bananas to pornography, as they like to put it in this dismissive way. We just didn't know that capitalism comes with a price, a more stressful life, serious work. So we have to learn. We are not children who got freedom as a New Year present. We have to learn also the harsh life, hard work, responsibilities, and so on and so on. So the first key question for me is this a correct analysis? I simply think, no, it is not. The big problem now, in these times, for me is who will appropriate, who will, as it were, interpret this surplus. We have different versions, from left-wing pro-communist nostalgia for the past regime, which I wouldn't even take seriously, to more rightist, sometimes even a little bit racist, populism, and so on. I think this provides maybe a unique chance for the left today. Something very important is happening today, I claim. After the fiasco of really existing communism, we can, it is as if with the 20 years delay, the Western welfare state social democracy is approaching the same point of self-erasure. Just follow the latest elections. In Germany, they are practically disintegrating. In France, it's the same. In Italy, who can even think of opposing Berlusconi? They are totally demoralized. Even in England, United Kingdom. So that option is in a crisis. This again confronts us all the more forcefully with this question, which is, you know, Sigmund Freud's famous short book, rather a long essay, Unbehagen in der Kultur, the discontent, uneasiness in culture. I think that today we are witnessing precisely a moment of this Unbehagen in, discontent in, at least the predominant form of capitalist democratic liberalism. And again, it's very important who will formulate, articulate this discontent, because will it be the right-wing populists? Will it be even some kind of abstract, purely violent reaction? We have traces of that in France and elsewhere, where, you know, those cars burning in the suburbs of Paris. I would worry very much about that, because those cars which burned in Paris suburbs didn't burn for a cause, you know. The big surprise was that they had no program, the protesters. First, people thought they are Islamists. Then it was clear they are not. They started, even before burning cars, burning the mosques and their own Muslim cultural center. It was a kind of a pure protest which wasn't able even to articulate itself in some kind of a even totally crazy religious or whatever utopia. So again, there is a certain discontent. The reasons of this discontent, I will try to articulate them. I think that the very, as we know from Hegelian dialectics, wait for the true danger for a movement is always its moment of defeat. Sorry, on the contrary, of victory. When you think you win, you as a rule, that's the trickery of our history, you discover that you won, but you don't have in your hands what you thought you will have. So, again, I claim that, to put it in very simple terms, that we are confronting today a whole set of critical points, antagonisms, use whichever name you want, for which, and I think people have this correct instinct, for which liberal democratic capitalism, the way we have it or strive towards, will not be the answer. I developed this elsewhere, I don't want to bore you with it. I claim that, for example, ecology, for example, biogenetics, for example, even within the strict economy, the threatening status, threatening in the sense that I claim that in the long term it cannot function within private property, so-called intellectual property, knowledge as a commodity if you want, and new growing apartheids, exclusions. It is as if one wall was brought down in '89. Now, 20 years later, it is as if, you know, Freud says somewhere that the symbolic image for castration is always the multiplicity of phalluses. No? If you dream, sorry for this male chauvinist obscenity, if you as a girl dream about many phalluses, this means the one is missing. It means castration. No? And the same here, you know, as if one wall fell down, but now we get them all around, you know, on the West Bank of Israel, United States, Mexico, and so on and so on. So there are problems all around. I claim we are approaching a certain critical point, and again, I claim it's extremely important that to see this as the central problem and to see, sorry, I still insist on this, a unique chance for the left. Because I think that's my, not even analysis, and I'll just give you a slogan, that liberalism, the way we know it now, and new forms of populism, fundamentalism, and so on, are caught into a kind of vicious circle, each reinforcing its opposite. We cannot get the way out in this way, along these lines. Interesting to note, I don't know if you know it, that even the father of the utopia of the 1990s, the utopia that liberal democratic capitalism is the answer, Francis Fukuyama, now changed his mind. He thinks that the very fact of biogenetics changes the coordinates. He now became almost, not quite, but almost a kind of a, well, not state socialist, but arguing for a much stronger state intervention, regulation, and so on and so on. So again, if 30, 40 years ago, some of us who were naive dreamt about so-called socialism with a human face, now it is as if the majority still dreams, even on the left, about so-called capitalism with a human face. The same system we have, but you know, a little bit more human rights, a little bit more this and that. The question is this enough? I claim, A, it's not enough, and B, for this, we don't need a critical reaction against the 1989. It's not, all that movement, solidarity, and so on went too far into one extreme. Now we need a proper measure, a little bit of counter-dose of socialism. No, I'm the first to admit that to allow in any forms the ex-communist back to power would have made the situation even worse, I would have said. In what sense? Because, you know, one of the tragedies of 20 years, and this for me is the crucial element, if I were to choose a symbol of where we are 20 years later, I would say Singapore, China. That is to say, my friend, although he's my political opponent, but I have a wonderful relationship with him, Peter Sloterdijk. What do I mean by wonderful relationship? We are totally opposed politically. When we meet, he tells me, I know, when you win, you will put me into Gulag. I tell him, of course, but I know when you win, you will, and so on. But then our compromise is, till that point, we can be good friends, and it works wonderfully. He told me, I don't know if you know this story, a wonderful detail, that he was recently thinking about, if you try to imagine 100 years from now, to which person from our time will they be building monuments? 100 years in the future from now. He gave a wonderful answer. Lee Kuan Yew. You know who is he? The ex, now he's dead, prime minister or president, I don't know, of Singapore. The inventor and first very successful practitioner of what we poetically call capitalism with Asian values, or less poetically, authoritarian capitalism. It's interesting to know that already at the beginning of his so-called reforms, Deng Xiaoping visited Singapore. I remember, I'm unfortunately old enough, seeing him on TV stating something like, this is the path that the entire China should follow. And it does, and some other countries. Why is this so important? Because I'm saying this as a critique of liberalism, but nonetheless, one should recognize one thing. Till now, there was one good argument for capitalism. Let's be frank. Sooner or later, it had its crisis. It needed a little bit of dictatorship here and there, South Korea, Chile, but sooner or later, it generated a trust towards democracy. And here I respectfully disagree with my liberal friends who think the same goes for China, give them another 10 years, there will be a new, much stronger Tiananmen democratic explosions. Sorry, I don't believe that. I think something, unfortunately, genuinely new is emerging there. To cut a long story short, a capitalism which is even much more violent, in the sense of dynamic, productive than ours, but which fits perfectly, as you put it, like a hand into a glove, made for it with authoritarian political system. And this should make us worry. This, how should I call it, historical pact, natural link between democracy and capitalism is fatally breaking down now. So, why? For many reasons. I developed them in my book, which will maybe appear here. One of them, just if some of you still do political economy, that old forgotten Marxist art. I can just give you maybe, okay, I will just improvise on many points, but you are used to these confusions of mine. No, you are my Stalinist superego. You know this old theory, which is not even specifically Marxist, of how in the development of capitalism we pass from rent to profit. At the beginning you have just a landlord who gives you land, blah, blah, then capitalist organizes production, profit. I claim that one, maybe the most fatal trend today in economy is a counter trend. Movement back, not exclusive, of course, profit is still profit, but rent is coming back in two domains, maybe even, I claim, in three domains. First, of course, the domain of natural resources, oil, the profit of oil, and other forms of wealth created by natural resources. Here I follow Marx, it's not profit and so on, it's rent. It's a form of rent for a certain monopoly if you are lucky to have something which cannot be simply produced but must be collected, and so on. And incidentally, if you still are a Marxist, this poses a nice problem. If you strictly follow Marx, and Marx even gives oil as an example of how natural resources are never a source of value. If you strictly follow Marx, then you must conclude that Venezuelan people and Hugo Chavez are exploiting the United States, not the other way around. But okay, the second, much more interesting thing, intellectual property. Take the stupid question. How did Bill Gates become, if he still is, the statistic, the richest person on earth? It's not by, as some desperate old-style Marxists try to demonstrate, by super exploiting, ultra-exploitation. It's again rent, I think. Where does his wealth come from? As you probably know, the cost of Microsoft program, Windows, whatever, has practically nothing to do with production costs. I claim that here this old category, which is not even specifically Marxist, of commons, a shared substance to which we all have to have access to survive, produce, communicate, collaborate. This old, and then we talk about commons, and then we talk about enclosure of commons, privatizing the commons. This process described already by Marx and others. I claim that Bill Gates, by imposing with operations which have not a lot to do, contrary to what people think, with true free competition, as an almost exclusive monopoly model, Windows and so on, he privatized part of our, what Marx called in a totally deceiving term, general intellect, part of our intellectual commons. And we are basically paying him rent for that. The key is not production profit, it's, he owns something to which we all need to have access in order to participate in our symbolic space communication, so we are paying him rent. And this is why, a little bit also to provoke my friends, but nonetheless, sincerely, I am crazy enough to remain faithful to term communism. Don't be afraid. I don't want new Leninist revolution, because I know very well that if those 20th century communists came to power, we will get China. We will get the problem is not that we will get some crazy communist experiments. Today we will get an even more wild socialism. And I don't have time to go on endlessly, although now you will maybe understand why my friends call me Fidel. Not because of politics, but you know Fidel Castro, like, he drops by 5 minutes, comrades, and if you are lucky, if he's tired, it's only 3 hours, no? So, okay, in China, we have this paradox of, and this is, I think, maybe the historical revenge of the 20th century communism on capitalism. We have this perverse new forum where communists are in power, and their main social task of the Communist Party in power is to control workers, to making them ready for the most ruthless capitalist exploitation. If you don't believe me, let me tell you a wonderful anecdote told to me by a dissident friend from China. You know, as every honest, dignified communist country, they have the sacred book, History of the Chinese Communist Party, which tells the mythic story. In the last edition, there is a weird auto-censorship. One chapter is missing. Which one? A very honest chapter. I would even agree with its praising. You know, communists in China played, again, nothing totalitarian, a quite honorable role in the 1920s, before Japanese invasion. When China did, at least the eastern coast, did go through a certain explosive, at least in those areas, economic growth, they organized workers there to strike and so on and so on. And you see the point, they censor that chapter, even if it means depriving their own history of a quite honest, glorified past. They are afraid it will give the wrong signal. Like, you know, if we did strike there, why don't we do it now, and so on and so on? Because what they, the Chinese communists in power, fear much more, infinitely more, than all. Forget about those stories about Falun Gong or that religious church and so on. What they really fear is as a B point, ecology, any serious ecological movement, as the A point, any, like, they fear solidarity, like, they fear trade union, self-organization of workers. Forget about religion. To try to organize independent trade unions, you, like, disappear in a gulag even before, how should I put it, your brain delivers the signal to your hand to do something, no? So, you see the problem, which is why I think that our answer to the question solidarity 20 years later should not be, okay, we did a wonderful job, let's forget about it, and now we are in real world, just the main task is to close the shipyards or whatever, no? We also should not accept that Western liberal story of you naive as East Europeans, you are not mature. The fight should go on in the sense of, yes, the surplus, where people feel they didn't get what they want, in a way we should stick to that, and the message is the same struggle goes on. I mean, we should literally, but I use the term, and I know what I'm talking about, believe me. I'm now in United States almost more recognized as a theologist. I'm a strange theologist, like atheist Christian, but I'm doing very well among theologists there. Something like a repetition in a strict Kierkegaardian sense, of what you don't simply repeat the same, but you know, you repeat it by referring to the unthought, impossible in the first occurrence. So, my message to you is, no, solidarity is not over. Today, more than ever. We should just fix precisely on that unrealized excess. Okay, so much for a short introduction. Now we start. Because why do we need all this? No, I am Fidel Castro, no way, at this level. Although, no, don't be afraid. I did what I think that every honest leftist, and I am one, as I told you clearly, even in a way I define myself as a communist, should do two things. If you have enough money and want to be a leftist, you should shoot them. Because then you will really be a leftist who ethically deserves to be a leftist. A, visit Cuba. No, not for be charmed, but precisely to see the sad failure, which is not even primarily a failure of police oppression, but the failure of this total inertia, how should I put it, total inertia, immobility of the system. For example, look, Cuba, an extremely fertile island, like, to be a little bit racist but benevolently, where it should have been theoretically impossible to starve. Like, as this racist proverb goes, you don't have anything to eat, hit with your head a tree, something will fall down, to eat. You know that according to Raúl Castro himself, Cuba has to import 80% of its food. According to Raúl Castro himself, they didn't have any hurricane this year, so the harvest of vegetables, I know the data for tomatoes and so on, was excellent. 70% got rotten on the fields, wasn't even, the inertia is extreme. And that's where I don't buy their rhetorics, which is, they try a desperate, as it were, rhetorical device of selling us their very poverty as a sign of their authenticity. It's interesting. If you go there, I didn't go on an official visit, my friends went, and told me that how they didn't cover up any. They showed them, you see houses falling apart, you see people almost starving. But then the message is not we screwed it up. The message is you see how heroic we are. We are ready to sacrifice everything to eat grass and so on to save to protect the revolution. Well, you can imagine. I don't think I'm the most desired person now in Cuba, because you can imagine what my dirty psychoanalytic association was. This gesture of displaying your lack, your failure itself, as a sign of authenticity. We call in psychoanalysis this gesture symbolic castration. And they're faithful to it, so no wonder their leader is called Fidel Castro. It's precisely. I don't think I will get a free visa for Cuba from now. Okay. And the other place you should visit is Gulag, just to see it. You know that now almost making a tourist propaganda that Magadan, Colima, is now demilitarized, or how do you say this? It's no longer a protected area, and you can go there. Because it's even served by American Airlines and so on. There is business there. And the wonder is that all the buildings, the entire Gulag is there as frozen in time. Everything is there, buildings and so on, free access. What you should go there, make deal with the local mafia just in a bar, you rent the car from them, if not they will beat you and so on, and make a tour. It's worth doing it. Let's go on. Okay, so my thesis is that if you still want to be authentically a leftist, then the first question to ask is, are we still in ideology? I'm not just selling you the old liberal stuff. No, ideology was over in 1990 with freedom and so on. Even some Marxists today who are very critical, like Noam Chomsky and the American last surviving big Marxist Frederick Jameson, the literary theorists, claim we live in a totally cynical era where, people no longer even pretend to believe so. All we have to do, critics, is just to tell the truth to the people. Here is this corruption, here that. There is no illusion. I totally disagree with that. I claim that we live in ideology more than ever. In what sense? Let me start with a personal experience. About half a year or almost a year ago, I had in New York a public debate. Unfortunately, I didn't like it very much, with Bernard-Henri Lévy in New York Public Library in New York. And something strange happened there. First, Henri Lévy, made a pathetic case for liberal tolerance. Something like, would you not like to live in a country where you can make fun of the predominant religion without the fear of being killed for it? Where women are free to dress the way they like and choose a man they love, and so on and so on. And I made a similarly pathetic case for communism. Something like, with the growing food crisis, ecological crisis, and so on, is there not a need to find a new way of collective action which radically differs from market as well as from state administration? What was the irony of the situation? It was that, to put it in these general terms, of course you agree. What should I say? No, I want women to be circumcised, enslaved, or what? And Bernard-Henri Lévy the same. He even ironically told me, oh, if this is he of all people. Oh, if this is communism, then I'm a communist, and so on and so on. What we both missed, of course, is ideology. Ideology is that, how should I put it, thick network of implicit rules, let's call it background sound of implicit rules, which situate in a certain historical, or to use the language theory term, pragmatic context, the general statements, and which made these general statements, which confer on them a very precise meaning. For example, if you say today, I struggle for freedom and democracy, of course, it's nice, but even if you are conservatives, if you are, let's say, conservatives, wouldn't even you become suspicious if left liberal feminists tell you this? Then you will say, wait a minute, what do you cover? Do you also cover abortion? Do you also cover gay marriages and so on and so on? No, I'm not against gay marriages. I only wanted to give you an example of how, when you get a general statement, you should always look into what actually this statement refers to in a situation. This is what makes it ideological. This is ideology. And now, just to recapitulate my old theory, this is on what we should always focus. Not just the big official message, freedom, democracy, or socialism, or faith, or our nation, and so on, but what does this involve in a concrete political situation? As I already developed the last time I was here, but not here in Gdansk, so permit me a short recapitulation, I always found it extremely fascinating at how all social rules that we rely on when we are part of a certain community, collective, big or small, are never complete. If you know the rules, it's almost the same as knowing nothing. You really know the rules only if you know the, how should I call them, meta rules, which tell you how in reality to apply these explicit rules. For example, what do I mean? Nothing too complex. Listen, there are certain social prohibitions. But is it not clear that, as is often the case, you are a total idiot if you follow them literally? There are prohibitions which function sometimes even directly as a solicitation to violate them, but in a discreet way. Like, you know, in a certain kind, I'm not saying with you, I don't know the situation, a certain type of Catholicism, no? Like, be faithful to your wife really means you have trouble, go to a prostitute, but do it discreetly, and so on, no? So we have this situation, or these are most sexual prohibitions, when an authoritarian father tells you, beware of women. This really means prove it that you are a man. It means almost the exact opposite, like do it. It's literally often a call to violation and so on. Much more interesting is the opposite example, where you have rules which, no, where you don't have prohibitions, but you are offered a freedom, a choice, but on condition that you don't really use this choice. You know, it's as if I allow you to do this, but on condition that you don't really do it. And I don't have to mention how many political choices are effectively structured in this way. So, which is why, incidentally, if I may bore you with a nice story from when I was young, in dissident activity under communism, it was very amusing to rely to this unspoken level of implicit rules. I discovered that sometimes this is much more subversive than directly opposing those in power. I'm referring to something in the early 80s where, okay, communism started already to disintegrate a little bit in ex-Yugoslavia, where there were elections. Elections in Yugoslavia were the usual socialist elections, a little bit better. Like communists didn't always get 99.9%, but they were satisfied with around 80, between 80 and 85, no, to make it more legitimate. So I was part of a small student journal, and there were elections. The evening of elections, we wanted to do a provocation. The idea was, shall we openly write, these elections are a fake, not really free? We discovered this would have been a stupidity. First, everyone knows it, as if there was an idiot who thought these are free elections. So, what to do? We found the formula. We said to ourselves, what if we just follow social ideology more seriously than it takes itself and just treat elections as really free. As if you know, by freedom we meant it was really not clear who will win, people are eagerly awaiting the news. So we simply published an issue of our modest newspaper on the evening after elections with big title, latest news, it looks that communists will still remain in power and so on. No? As if you know, it's uncertain, people are waiting for them. And then something magic happened. We were called to the Central Committee, and I'm not exaggerating, communism was already disintegrating. We also knew it. I'm not making a hero of myself, like we didn't really risk anything, just a little bit of shouting there. So they called us there, an apparatchik received us and started to shout at us, you know, like, you boys, you don't do this. What? And then it was a wonderful scene. We just told him, but really, please, what is wrong? You are claiming these are free elections. We just treated them as free elections. What's the problem? And it was a tragic situation. The guy, of course, couldn't tell us, wait a minute, why are you appearing as if we could have lost? So he said just something like, sorry for the dirty word, don't fuck with me, boys. You know very well what I mean. I said, please, but what do you mean? It was, you know, this implicit rule which was not explicit, or I like stories, as you can see, another even better example. When I was in the army, military service, I don't know how was it with you, but after 1 or 2 weeks of training, we had, then you become a real soldier, we had to sign an oath, you know, the usual bullshit, swearing I'm ready to give the life, blah, 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 to my country, and so on. And a colleague of mine did something for which I think he should be inscribed with golden letters in history of the critique of ideology. He refused to sign the oath. When, you know, we approached one after the other, this big book where, and the officer asked him, why don't you sign it? The guy said, well, it's a free choice, no? Am I ordered to sign it? The officer said, of course not, it's your choice. Then the guy said, okay, then I will not sign it. Then the officer said, are you provoking me? You will not. Then the guy said, listen, let's resolve the problem. Give me a written order and I will sign it. And after some tension and shouting, 5 minutes later, I have a photocopy at home. It's a unique document of how ideology functions. The officer wrote and signed an order which goes something like, I order you to voluntarily sign the oath. You know, he made ideology, how should I put it, appear as such. Second thing that we should learn here now is that all this, how should I put it, dark side of ideology, the secret obscene rituals and so on, this is not something spontaneous. I'm not saying we follow the rules, but from time to time the rules are too suffocating, we just want to explode and so on. No, 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 I think that if there is a thing which is absolutely regulated, it is precisely these wild transgressions. Let me give you a very general theory. Do you remember your first experiences of smoking and drinking? I claim it has nothing to do with pleasure, if you are honest. How does it usually happen? Let's say smoking. You are when you were, I don't know what, I hope not 4, 6, 7 years old, with some friends in the school, and they called you usually to the toilet, you know what the adults are doing, wouldn't you like to try? And admit it how it began. You inhaled the first time and started, is this it? It's horrible. But then they told you, no, no, that's the real thing, and so on. It's absolutely crucial that first you experienced it as disgusting, and so on. It's strictly a learned, imposed on you tradition. I claim it's absolutely the same for drinking. Remember your first whiskey and so on. It was, it's bitter, and so on. No, you should learn it. It was, at the beginning, it's not a personal pleasure. I mean, isn't it clear that if you want to drink for pleasure, my God, you drink a fruit juice, you don't drink whiskey. Whiskey is a matter of manners, I claim, a matter of social ritual, and so on and so on. It's a kind of a... And I claim, now we come to more touchy waters, that even with sexuality it's like this. If it's for pleasure, you masturbate. Doing it with others, it's strictly like drinking whiskey. It's painful, but because it's done in a regulated way, it brings you a kind of a pervert pleasure and so on and so on. And sorry, I don't have time more in detail to go into these paradoxes. For example, if you are a member, I am, not very proud, of exclusive club, in the sense of a certain snobbish circle of people who pretend to be specialists in something. I'm not a specialist, but I like very much the big classical music. I noticed one iron rule, that how do you establish yourself as not an idiot? You take a big composer, and if you want to be an idiot, you simply take his big works and say, oh, Beethoven, Ninth Symphony, and so on. You are an idiot. The trick to do is, yes, a big composer, and then you must choose a minor work, you know, to sign your difference and say, hey, but forget about that big bullshit, this is the true masterpiece, you know. And it's even difficult to find it today, because when I was young, this role was played by late string quartets. Now, I was told by friends, they are out. They are too well known now. There are different candidates. One of the candidates are still late piano sonatas. Late. No, if you say Moonlight, you are out. Kids. You must say, it must be something which everybody hates, which cannot be blah, 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 and so on. Or, for example, another kid example, Tchaikovsky is out, no? So, if you want to be a snob, you know, with Tchaikovsky, the symphonies 4, 5, and 6 are big hits. You must say, they are bullshit. Number 3 is crucial. No, but this is, again, how should I put it? The point is not, simply that you want to show it. The point is that in order to truly follow the rules, you must violate the rule in a very precise way, which is in itself regulated even more. This is why, as you probably know, if you know, when you want to become member of a high society, if you go to, they no longer exist even today, I think, we are all becoming vulgar. Some of these special courses where they teach you how to behave as a lady or gentleman, you always fail there. Why? Because they teach you the rules, but they don't teach you how to violate the rules. And you know, when you are part of a circle, if you don't know how to violate the rules, you are lost. And this is what brought me the big experience of my theory of ideology. It took me some time to learn, for example, that in ex-Yugoslavia, if you wanted to be, I didn't want to be, but I had some connections there because we are a small country, everybody knew everyone else, practically Slovenia, that to be a member of inner nomenclatura of the Communist Party, it is not only that you could be cynical about the ruling communist ideology, it's that you had to be. To truly believe in the system was strictly considered a first step towards dissidence. He really believes, my God, he will discover it doesn't really function. 2 of my friends lost their jobs. Not for any dissident activity, but for just taking it too seriously. So again, when we talk about ideology, always remember this. It's not just the explicit text. It's all this thick background of implicit rules and so on and so on. It's the system and its institutionalized transgressions, violations, and so on and so on. And this is not only ideology in a bad sense, how should I put it? I think, but this is maybe too much theory for tonight, just to give you a hint, it's something grounded in the very nature of the symbolic order. Symbolic order at its purest, as Jacques Lacan, one of my gods, psychoanalysts, developed nicely, symbolic order is something which works, symbolic communication at its purest. It's not a communication where I have something to tell you, but it's a kind of an empty communication where I give you something, you reject it as unnecessary, but the profit is the communication leak. To give you an example, for what is for me civilization and at the same time civility at its 0 point. Let's say, for example, let's say I have to apologize to you. Okay, I did something bad remark, I apologize. Okay, I say, please, I apologize. If you are polite, then the proper way to accept my apology is to say, thanks, but really, I need no apology, it's okay. But you get the catch. You can say only after I do apologize. Which is why once it happened to me with my personal friend, theoretical opponent, the feminist who will visit you also here, I heard Judith Butler, the language, so I apologized. Then she said, Slavoj, but I know you don't have to apologize. Then my evil mind gave me the idea immediately to say, then I take it back, fuck you if you don't apologize. You see the point? If I gave, you see the paradox, the way to really accept the apology is to claim that it was superfluous. Because if she were to say, my God, yes, you were a bastard, I needed the apology, it would have been rather a signal that the apology was not enough. And I will not bore you with all similar examples, like, let's say, for example, I have money, you don't have it, I invite you to lunch, it's clear that I will pay. But don't you also have, like in my country, this ritual that for at least a minute you have to insist, no, I will pay. And we all know it's bullshit, but we have to go through that. The mystery of human communication is that although we both know it's a bullshit, somehow it works. You know what I mean? We have to go through it. This is elementary ideology. So again, look at the unwritten rules. Now I will have, because I'm like 1/4 into it, so your superego is getting stronger. No. I want to give you a couple distracted examples of ideology. First, I hope there is something that you also hate as much as I hate, but nonetheless sometimes are transfixed upon seeing. Look, a very simple question. Why do we have on our TVs so much of this, Animal Planet, and all this nature, all this National Geographic, all these channels about natural life? I claim it's ideology at its purest. You should read it, I claim, against the contrast of in contrast to what some sociologists, I will return to them later, like Ulrich Beck, call our reflexive society, risk society, society of choice, and so on, where, as it were, nothing functions. For everything you have to invent rules, and so on and so on. I claim it strictly against this background that we perceive social life as a life which, even if it's a poor life of some stupid birds or moles or whatever animals, somehow they know it. Everything functions there. They know when to collect food, how, when to copulate, whatever. And I think that it is this smooth functioning which fascinates us. There is finally a society where, to use this famous fascist formula, everyone is at her own place, things work. I claim that even when in National Geographic, they do reports, as you know, they do, especially in the journal, not on natural life, but on human societies. I claim they are treated as ape societies or rabbits or whatever. They present a small city or a tribe, and again, everything magically works there. And I claim to be slightly ironic that, the key reference here is sexuality. If in our times sexual relationship is getting more and more disoriented, if sexuality is, how should I put it, out of joint, practically always in our human species, out of joint in the sense of not any postmodern bullshit, but let's say classical antique, that Daphnis and Chloe story. The point is, like, no matter how you imitate nature or trust your instincts, you will never do it. You need poetry, you need a teacher, and so on. I think the contrast is precisely that animals know when and how to do it. The French Lacanian psychoanalyst Gérard Weitzman put it in a wonderful way when he said that animals know, I quote, how to have sex ahistorically. In the sense that, you need no seduction, no narratives, whatever, you just know how to do it. With us, it's never like that. So, you see my point. The point is that even there, in an apparently pure description of nature, the reason it fascinates it is against this background of risk sexuality, all the confusion of the rules, and so on and so on. Because you know what's the problem with rules? That even if you get a direct rule, do this, you have always this uncertainty. Is this really meant as a rule or as an ironic point of reference to be subverted, and so on and so on? Now, a more general conclusion. What is our reaction then to this risk society constellation? A couple of paradoxical reactions we have to it. The first one is the predominant form of ideology, maybe not yet in your society or mine, but in the West already, where we get more and more what I'm tempted to call, following some of my friends, cultural capitalism. Which means what? Just observe the publicity. I claim I observed, at least in the Western Europe and United States, a certain big shift, break in publicity. If, let's say, ideally, in some first primitive stage, a typical publicity referred to real or imagined properties of the object. Imagine Land Rover. It would have said it uses only so much gasoline per 100 kilometers. It can really climb a steep mountain, even in very rough roads or whatever, like some reference to qualities. Then we had next stage, which is the stage of status symbol. No? It plays on owning this car guarantees your social status more than your neighbors, and so on and so on. But again, today we are getting something much more complex. It's not real property, it's not social status, it's your experience, it's subjectivization. I claim that today's typical publicity would have been rather something like, do you live in a big city? You feel alienated, just part of a bureaucratic, mechanized machine. Drive a Land Rover and you will feel as a true man. In nature, you know, experiencing yourself as, and so on and so on. Now, in the last decade, I claim, we are even going a step further where it's not just this general experience, but a very precise experience of authenticity and even of political correctness. The whole political, even anti-capitalist dimension is included. You don't believe me? Do you already have the misfortune here in Warsaw, sorry, in Gdansk, but in Poland in general, to have a Starbucks coffee? Be happy, not? Because you know this coffee chain started in Seattle, capital of political correctness. Is this at its worst? They tell you openly, when you buy our cappuccino, yes, it's expensive. But why? Because, as they put it, I don't want to lose time to quote it. First, we buy our coffee only with organically grown from farmers in Guatemala who grow it in an organic way. So we take care of environment, and with part of the profit, we support children there, giving for schools, clean water, and so on. Then they claim we live in individualistic society. We no longer have old forms of community, church, town meetings. So in our cafeterias, you have a chance to find an ersatz community, and so on. So again, as they put it, you don't just buy a coffee. You buy all this coffee. You buy yourself kind of a entrance ticket to being ecologically conscious, to doing something for the solidarity among people, and so on and so on. What I find so beautiful about this is that in the old age, by old age I mean 15, 20 years ago, there was a, more or less, you remember, a clear opposition. You are a consumerist, you ruthlessly buy, spend, but if you had a bad conscience, oh my God, what did I do for humanity? Then you have to do something more. Give to charity, do something, whatever. Now that's the genius of capitalism. In one and the same move, consumerism itself allows you to pay the price for consumerism. You consume, but at the same time you do something for ecology, blah, blah, blah. And I think this dimension of buying the authentic subjective experience is more and more crucial, namely to provoke you. Even with buying, I don't know to what extent it's already fashionable with you here to buy organic fruit, apples, and so on. I claim probably you are like me, pretty cynical. You don't really believe this is so healthy and so on. Why then do you buy those half-rotten apples which cost twice the genetically modified artificial apples we all like? It's because you buy an authentic experience. Isn't it nice to say to yourself, you see, I bought an apple and thereby I participate in, I did something for Mother Earth, I'm part of a big movement, and so on and so on. Okay, I will not bore you with examples here, some of them are wonderful, just to tell you that how to put it, this confusion between ideology and non-ideology, this how when you buy something, you buy the whole experience with it. Which is why, although people say we are at the end of ideology, I claim, maybe at the end of big ideology, but in our very apparently post-ideological attitude, no, we are just not even consumers. What's today's ruling ideology, frankly? I claim some kind of a watered-down, spiritualized hedonism, which is why Dalai Lama is so popular, no? Something like, be truly yourself, be authentic yourself, realize your potentials, and so on and so on. Why this is even more impregnated by ideology, specifically because ideology is, as it were, much more immediately inscribed into an apparently non-ideological procedure. I don't know if it was also reported in your media, but again, I cannot refrain from telling you a story about recently, it's a half years old, but it was presented publicly only a week ago in Boston, MIT, I think. I was just in the United States, I read the report. A new invention, which I think it's technologically extremely important, but also is ideology embodied. Maybe it will change our lives. It's not yet clear. It's, maybe some of you know it. I will try to describe it in a primitive way. It's fascinating. Something they call sixth sense. Technologically, it's relatively simple. It's one web camera, one digital projector, all so small that they hang here very light. Then, both with a mirror and both connected to a very strong cellular phone here, which is again wirelessly connected with internet. Okay, how does it function? It's quite fascinating. I will first describe you the effect and then explain it. Let us say I am not sure about if I am late for my flight. I just held the ticket in front of me, the plane ticket, and immediately I can read on it 20 minutes late or whatever, or it is on time or whatever. Or I see a book and touch it in front of me, immediately I can read on the cover of the book the reviews, is it a good book, a bad book, and so on. Or I meet a person whom I vaguely remember, but I'm not sure who he is, and immediately I can read on that person's shirt or jacket, this guy known as idiot or whatever you want. How does it work? It sounds so simple. The camera, web camera, sees what you point, sees things in front of you. Then the camera is connected through the wireless. The camera processes the data to the internet, where at your site there is enough machinery, and you can test it if you don't believe me on YouTube. Put it YouTube Sixth Sense. You can see. It's shocking how it works. There, the system is complex enough to identify what it sees, and of course through internet it gets the data. The data, selected data, go back to the projector, which can use any surface of the book, a wall, and so on, and it functions so fast that, you know, it is this, how to put it, immediate effect. And it works already with so magically, like I do this. And it is trained, my camera, programmed to read this as photographic. So only by doing this, I have what I framed as a picture. And then later I just make a symbol of a frame and the picture is projected. Why? It's quite fascinating. Why? Because it's the same as with that publicity. Till now, we divided the two. This is no wonder that an Indian guy called not mystery, but mystery without E. Mystery. He's called mystery. Did it at MIT lab in Boston, invented it, and so that you think, oh, but this must cost. Already now, when it's not even serially produced, this entire mechanism costs $350, which is what, a little bit over 200 euros. Can you imagine how cheap it will maybe get if it will be mass produced? His idea was the following one. We usually dissociated real life contact with objects and being caught into the internet, cyberspace. As if, you know, the typical cyberspace person is this kind of a geek fanatic who, not caring about washing, eating, just stares there into the screen, contra real life. And his idea was to bring the two together, to make the experience of cyberspace continuous with our ordinary space. So the idea is that, you know, you just no withdrawal towards, even if you want to check the email, it's wonderful, I've seen it. You do in front of you a sign for that, you know, at. The photo camera, blah, blah, recognizes this as, I want to read email, and then you just approach anything that can serve as a surface. You hold the book, you approach a wall, it will immediately project onto the wall your computer screen, where with further touching you can do it, and then you just do like this over, and it's magic. Why is it important? Because again, first, as in the case of a publicity, the gap is closed. As it were, virtual side appears, and therein resides, I think, ideological mystification. Virtual reality, the symbolic virtual universe, appears as simply continuous with reality. In the sense that, although you know it's not true, but you experience, how should I put it, you experience the symbolic data about objects, as if they are magically emanating out of objects themselves. You know, like the example I saw, I look at this glass, I'm not sure, and I just focus on this glass, it will appear on it. Made out of this, you can get it in that store for so much money, and so on. You know, it's as if you just look at an object and the object gives you the information. Why is this important and ideology? Because I claim the problem is not that this radically breaks with our old life. No, it just makes explicit what was in a way always already here. Because even if before, in our ordinary reality, I see just a table. No, I never see just a table. In what sense? Let's say you are a racist. Let's say you hate a certain nation, Arab or a Jew, the two usual candidates. Of course, when you see an Arab or a Jew, you don't see only an Arab or a Jew. You automatically add all your prejudices and so on and so on. And this mechanism is just rendered explicit here. I think that, again, this evocates nicely the trap, the ideological closure we are caught into. Because, again, this machinery is not innocent. It's not innocent in the sense that what it imitates is a certain ideological mechanism. Okay, I know what you want now, at least those who know something about me and knows about my dirty jokes and so on. Yeah, I know what I will say. Even if not, I will tell it to you. Of course, immediately one thinks about sex. I will not try to offend anyone. I look up at that woman and it's projected. I have nice breasts, I am available for this and so on and so on. That would be a nice world, but okay. I have to go through my obscenity. Okay, but what, again, the next thing about, where are we? Oh my God, time is running. Yeah, the next thing about ideology, for me, is that how, again, today, one of the forms of ideology, as already emphasized, is precisely to function as anti-ideology. What do I mean by this? Did you see, was it shown here, one of these two latest Israeli films, Waltz with Bashir or Lebanon? You know, they're big hits. They're both, I claim, ideology at its purest. In what sense? For example, Lebanon is a movie about the 1982 invasion of Lebanon up to Beirut by Israeli forces, and it's pure humanization. It says nothing about politics and so on. Almost all of the movie takes place within a tank, and it's just, you know, this terrifying experience. What does it mean to be in there? It sounds very humanistic, like forget about ideology, war is madness, and so on and so on. But I claim this withdrawal to humanity is ideology at its purest. Why? Because it precisely allows you to erase the entire political context, you know. Everything is all of a sudden reduced to your authentic experience of horror, fear, but my God, what about questions? What were they doing in Lebanon? Who was shooting him? For what reason? All this disappears. So that you will not say that I'm only criticizing one side. I will not even enter the problem of Arab ideology. I will give you another nice example of ideology. Cuban, today's Cuba, detective novels. You know that they have, I wonder if he's translated here, they have one author who is a worldwide hit now, Leonardo Padura Fuentes. He writes detective novels which take place in today's Havana. And first, after reading it, he's translated into English also now, I was quite shocked at the bleakness of the image of today's Cuba. You know, like, no mystification. Building falling down, corruption of nomenclatura, people starving, prostitution, drugs, violence, corruption, and so on. So I already told myself, oh my God, this man must have a guy must have a nice villa in Miami or somewhere up there. And I was quite shocked to learn that no, he is in Cuba with full support of the state. And then it got me that this, what's his message? None of the socialist ideology. He totally cynical, with distance, and even explicitly. The heroes perceive themselves as a lost generation. Like, because of this stupid socialist project, we lose contact, we are a lost generation, things go on around in the world. But nonetheless, what is the fundamental message? Again, some kind of personal authenticity. Nonetheless, this country is our fate. We shouldn't take the easy way of escaping to Miami paradise. Our place is here. We should be like adult men with all bitterness. You know, it's an absolutely refined, I claim, way of justifying staying there and being faithful to the regime, even when you include all the bitterness, awareness of failure, and so on and so on. So this reduction to, how should I put it, zero level of beneath our ideology, we are humans, is, I think, the most refined ideological mechanism today. It works not only in literature, real life, also in movies and in analysis of ideology. Let me give you an example. Here, my reproach to critics, liberal critics of Stalinism, is that, not that, oh, they are too critical, they didn't see some good aspects of Stalinism, but that they are not radical enough. In what sense? Did you see the movie which was the mega hit, the West German one, the Life of the Others, probably also, that we got an Oscar. You know, the guy is fanatically anti-communist, for good reasons. I inquired with friends, what does that stupid name mean? Von Donner Schmack or whatever. He's of East Prussian nobility, that was his revenge for the communists taking his castle and taking his... But you know what's the movie about? If Germany, a corrupted minister, wants to have sex with the wife of an important dramatic writer. So in order to get rid of the competitor, he orders Stasi, the secret police, to observe that guy so that they will find something to plant on him, even so that he will be arrested, she will have for his use the wife. What's wrong with this film? And I spoke 3 days ago with Timothy Garton-Nash, and he laughed and agreed that you must know immediately what's wrong. In East Germany, the way it was, the same person, imagine a writer, well-known abroad, blah, blah, he would have been under constant observation, even if no minister wants to screw your wife. You know, the liberal illusion is, it is as if in order to explain something evil, you must have this good old egotist utilitarian subject. You know, somebody who wants money, sex, power, or whatever. What they didn't get is that even if all the people were to be relatively honest within the system, like the other hero of the people, the Stasi observer, the same thing would have gone on. It's too naive. And I claim the same goes, that would be my critique, not that they are too harsh, of these big histories of Stalinism, like Robert Conquest and so on. When they try to explain things, they get, for me, too much into what? It's as if you scratch the surface, beneath the Stalinist, you get the same old egotist, hedonist, liberal subject who just wants power, money. So then you get this ridiculous image of Stalin must have been really evil. Okay, he was evil, of course. But again, you know what's the tragedy of Stalinism? One American fighting atheist said something about religion. I think it's only half true. But it holds even more for Stalinism. He said something really evil. He said, without religion, good people would have been doing good thing and bad people bad thing. But you need something like religion in order to have good people doing bad things. Okay, you can say now it's the opposite exact, no? Okay, let's say with, at least with fundamentalist religion and so on, it's true. But I claim it goes absolutely for Stalinism. The problem is not evil people were doing evil things. The true tragedy was that people who at least originally thought doing something noble, sacrificing, and then did the horrors. Now, a step further. You stop me when you want. You will say now probably, okay, so what's this? This reduction to we are all humans and so on and so on. Isn't there something positive in it? Doesn't this mean don't categorize your opponent, see in your opponent just a neighbor in the religious Judeo-Christian sense? I claim not. I claim that what disappears in this authentic reduction to your humanity is precisely the dimension of the neighbor. Neighbor in Judeo-Christianity, be careful here, is not my neighbor in the sense the fellow man, the one with whom I sympathize and so on. Neighbor is, as some theologists whom I respect but don't agree with, but here partially I do, like Levinas, neighbor is a much more radical abyss of the otherness. Neighbor is precisely when I no longer, let's say I know you, sorry, I take it, don't take it personally, I need someone to play a bad guy. I know you, you are a nice guy and so on and so on. Then what if for a minute you were to do something which would, like, how could you, I don't know, some cynical, brutal remark when you saw someone suffering? You know, doesn't it happen to you that a guy can do something totally brutal, out of character, and then you ask your, but it goes also the opposite way, which is slightly nicer, that you think somebody is evil, all of a sudden he does or she does a totally unexpected gesture of mercy, and at that point you said, my God, did I know this guy at all? At that point you encounter the neighbor. And this dimension of the neighbor, I claim, is precisely what is disappearing today. Because of the specificity of our postmodern societies and so on, every proximity of the neighbor is more and more experienced as violent. This is why we have political correctness. I claim political correctness, or all these fears, sexual harassment and so on, is also, not only, but also a protection against the neighbor. What do I mean by this? Let me tell you a stupid comical anecdote. A year and a half ago, or a year, I was in Boston, Massachusetts, MIT, with my good friend Mladen Dolar, and after the talk we were invited to dinner, and dinner was a big thing, some 20 professors, and we were told, now please, because we didn't know each other, you introduce yourself. The professor who presided the dinner said, please say first where you are affiliated, your job, point to your field of work now, and 3, your sexual orientation. Now, I had a problem there, no? But I don't say this to make fun of the Americans, because here they are more open. But, for example, let me give you immediately a counterexample where they are much more constrained. A friend of me last summer visited me in Slovenia, and we went to the Adriatic beach. We have a small coast, 10 kilometers now. And then this friend of mine was totally shocked, because most of the women on our beaches, I don't know how is it with you here, topless is practically the rule there. Already for 30 years, nobody even notices breasts. Okay, I will not go into details now. But what I want to say is that, but for this American friend of mine, because there, with all their pornography and so on, it's out of the question. You can be arrested as a woman if you are topless. He felt horribly harassed, like, oh my God, a breast there, a breast there. You know. So you see, that's how different it is. I claim we both were doing the same thing, just in a different way of protecting ourselves against the neighbor. Just for us, for him, the intrusion of the neighbor was naked breasts. For us, it was sexual orientation, and so on and so on. And okay, I don't want to repeat all jokes, but what I would have to do here is to demonstrate you, maybe you know this detail from some of my books, how even with pornography is, I think, one of the biggest, most censored protections against the neighbor. Where you remember one disgusting thing if you have the fortune or misfortune of seeing some old hardcore pornography, of what is so fascinating in the disgusting sense there. Okay, you have a long pornographic movie. You know, you cannot only show that. There must be some kind of a stupid story which introduces it. And how absolutely ridiculously stupid these stories are. I mean, I remember one from my youth where, it's embarrassing, but I won't. That's a housewife is at home alone, and the plumber comes and does something in the kitchen, and then he says, okay, I fixed that hole. And then the housewife said, I have another hole. Can you also fix that hole? I mean, you are embarrassed how vulgar it is. So why? Now you will say, but today this is passé. It's not. Today, I asked friends. The predominant form of hardcore porno is so-called gonzo, where the story, you don't even get the ridiculous story. Gonzo means pornography with direct interaction with the camera. You know what I mean? Actors don't even pretend that it's a fiction. Like the actress looks into the camera. Am I okay like this? Should I move it? You know, I claim this is censorship. What kind of a censorship? You can have a melodrama, passion, you cry. You don't see all. But if you see it all physically, then serious emotional engagement is prohibited. What is prohibited is to have, yes, I know what you will maybe say. What about Catherine Breillat, France, romance? She tries precisely this. Let's call it hardcore elements, but at the same time, emotional engagement, blah, blah. But that's why she remains marginal, I claim. I claim because if you see a person in the intimate act of sex, seeing the real passion at that moment would have come too close to penetrating the proximity of the neighbor. So it must be either just politeness with a distance, can be crying, but not intimacy, or if intimacy, to protect it, to remain at a distance, it must be this totally ridiculous, totally ridiculous story. So, okay, maybe slowly I should end. I'm now half into it. So, if you allow me another 5 minutes of just to recapitulate what I said. I claim that this is at the origin of the problem with the immigrants we have today. In the old, more traditional cultures, we had habits and so on. And as everybody knows, the main, how should I call it, function of habits is to keep the neighbor at a proper distance. Now, all this is disintegrating, or because of the globalism, multiculturalism, we lack this kind of a protective screen against, the neighbor. So, how then does, at this level, what does this protective screen, what happens? Let me give you, to conclude, this is a wonderful story. You should get the film. You should show it, my God. No, this time I'm not repeating myself. It's new. Some friends of mine, I know them in Denmark, did a terrible movie. Here I'm almost becoming old-fashioned moralist. It is horror. You should show it. It's called Free Men When Killers Start to Speak, or whatever. Two Danish documentaries. It's about, maybe you know from history, in 65, 66 in Indonesia. First, the communists tried to do a coup d'etat. It failed. Then the right military did a counter coup. And after they killed about 2.5 million people as supposed communists, most of them Chinese, and so on. People who were one of the main members of one of the main groups of that murdering, of the murderers. Now they are successful Indonesians. One of them is senator, the other businessman, third a journalist. They felt so unrestrained that they want a public recognition of their work. So they ordered a documentary to be made, which is the most obscene film that I've seen. They openly, shamelessly boast about their act. You know, you have a person there who looks into the camera and says, you know, it took us about 2 weeks to discover what is the most pleasurable and effective way to kill a woman while raping her. And they describe in detail how you should strangle her with a metallic rope while you are raping her, and so on and so on. And then they describe what is the most effective way to torture and humiliate a man, how you cut his balls, make them swallow it. And all this is part of a public talk show on Indonesian TV, where the guy tells the story of torturing, and then the moderator says, what an original insight, one big applause to that person, and so on. Listen, I have a problem. Can I, this is called, I'm very sorry, diabetes. Can I run to the toilet? Of course. I'm very sorry.
That's impossible.
Make a break, and so on. Am I going to the right direction? Sorry.
On nie przejdzie do toalety. Tam nie ma miejsca.
Slavoj is not only the great philosopher, he's a real rock star.
Teraz możesz po polsku.
Zrobimy tak, że ja zrezygnuję ze swoich pytań, a Państwo pomyślcie, jakie pytanie chcecie zadać Slavojowi i jakoś spróbujemy to ogarnąć z tym jednym krótkim.
Myślę, że już
Jacques Lacan's Seminar 11, Four Fundamental Concepts. Okay, now there is a very mysterious phrase about look and gaze by Lacan. Something like in English, the picture is in my eye, but I am also in the picture. What does it mean? With regard to theory of ideology and the role of fantasy, it means something very important. It means that, for example, let me take the example of anti-Semitism. It is not only that the Jew is in me, in the sense that for an anti-Semitic subject, when he speaks about Jews, he doesn't describe real Jews, but to put it in simple terms, his ideological fantasy is that he is also in the Jew. This is usually forgotten. In what sense? In the sense that his entire, how should I put it, consistency as a subject depends on his fantasy. You take away from him his fantasy, everything disintegrates. For example, the Nazi subject. That's why I always repeat it. I did it, I think, when I was here years ago. It's not, the true question of anti-Semitism is not were the Jews really like that, but why does a Nazi racist need this figure of the Jew? If you take the Jew from him, everything disintegrates. Here, I don't have time to do it, but here we could have developed how we are to change theory of ideology today. Marx is ambiguous, but with some Marxists, they have this simplistic theory, you know, ideology is important, but it's an effect of material processes and so on. No, the true mystery is how ideology is not so much an effect of material processes, but their constituent. If you take away the ideology, you don't get simply reality. Reality itself, as social reality, disintegrates. Which means that, and now I come back to celebrating not just solidarity in general, but you here, this is a time where we are. It's not only that we have ideologies, we are in ideologies. And in the times like those today, I didn't have time for what I wanted more to develop. For example, the ideology of free choice, how it functions. Why is this important today in the United States? With all critique, I support Obama. He is, as the first, to put it cynically, European president of the United States. He tries to break that elementary consensus, freedom of choice. What do we Europeans know that Americans don't know? We know that freedom of choice, or individual freedom as such, is important, but can work only against a very complex background of of institutional, ethical, whatever, presuppositions, politeness, civility, and so on and so on. These are not limitations of freedom. These are the very base of freedom, a condition of freedom. I mean, in a very naive level, if I am to live in a free society, which means I can safely walk around, interact with others, do what I want, do we imagine how many institutional and ethical and customized whatever conditions have to be met? I have to have a basic trust in public order, my God, to walk freely around. To communicate with others, I have to rely on an elementary civility and so on and so on. Which is why I think this debate they have is important. The danger is that when you insist in a wrong way on the freedom of the choice, the freedom that you want to defend, if realized, would seriously undermine other freedoms. I think that's their problem. For example, in our societies, we have electricity and water, more or less. And did you notice, to put it ironically in the American way, that we are brutally deprived of the choice to choose our provider of electricity and water? You just get what is there. But frankly, I don't mind about being deprived of that, because the last thing I want is to worry about, you know. And I claim it's simply part of our European identity to claim that, and I hope we will remain at that, that in some way, if you are aware that society, state, provides at least some general health coverage, far from diminishing your freedom, this opens up the freedom of doing other things and so on and so on. I know concretely from my friends in the United States who are, they are, yes, free. My good friend, no, you didn't translate him, that Jewish friend from Chicago, Eric Sentner, who wrote wonderful books on Judaism, psychoanalysis, ideology, and so on. For example, he had a strange illness, now it stopped. Dermosclerosa, skin hardening. No, the horrible thing is where it happened, in his heart. Only 3-4 people in the world have it, they simply, and he was in a total panic. Yes, he had the freedom to choose, so he had to sell his apartment, play on the stock market, and so on and so on. I know that I shouldn't be too utopian here. I'm just trying to give you an example of how there are certain things which on which you have to rely as your background, precisely in order to retain your freedom. But that's too much. So for today, so now my final message. Is it translated into your language? A novel which is not the greatest novel of all times, but I, in a way, nonetheless really like it. The novel by Ismail Kadare, the Albanian guy, Palace of Dreams. It's a interesting novel taking place in some empire in the mid-19th century, Oriental, like Turkish Empire. It's a little bit Kafkaesque. The idea is, in this empire, they have a gigantic palace with thousands employed, where they collect from the entire empire and analyze dreams, and try to get the main dream, the message of the dream, and so on. The idea is the following one, a very simple one, correct, I think, of course, formulated in this satirical way, that what sustains certain power is not simply oppression and so on, it's what in psychoanalysis we would have called the libidinal investment of people in power, the dreams they project, even if they appear to be subversive dreams and so on. You know, if you want your subjects subordinated to you to obey you, it's good to know how they dream about you. You know what I mean? In the sense of what they invest in you and so on and so on. So the first step of liberation is to be a Stalinist, don't be afraid. Not against the power, against your dreams. You have to liberate your dreams from what made them an instrument into being fascinated by those in power, subordinated to them, and so on and so on. I will give you here an extreme example. It always fascinated me, reading books about the fate of the artist under Stalin, how even the greatest dissidents, at least the one well known, were secretly had a kind of what we call in psychoanalysis, have a kind of a transference onto Stalin, were fascinated by him. Do you know all those details? For example, once Stalin, in his typical way, simply called Shostakovich. You know, he almost got a heart attack. The phone reached up, hi, Stalin here, Joseph, what? He wanted Shostakovich's opinion on Mandelstam, like should Mandelstam be arrested or not, and so on. Then the result was that after they covered this, Shostakovich said, comrade, I would like to talk of you a little bit more. Stalin asked why. Shostakovich said, about death, life, and ultimate question. You know, what betrays this remark? And then Stalin, of course, immediately. That, you know, all of a sudden, beneath all this horror of Stalin, this whatever, you see that he was fascinated. Stalin, this ultimate, absolute ruler who ruled over death and life and must have some almost privileged knowledge of the ultimate horrors. It's interesting that you find the same in Mandelstam himself. Don't just think about that poem, Anti-Stalin. It was a much more ambiguous. Meyerhold, Bulgakov, all of them, you know, that's what you have to get rid of. You have to, as it were, to change your dreams. How? Do you know, did you see the movie? It's an old-fashioned communist melodrama, Italian one. It has some nice moments, although it's boring. Bernardo Bertolucci, the 20th century, Novecento. There is a wonderful, shocking scene, like 1 hour into the film, where in this big plantation estate in northern Italy, Emilia, I think, workers confront their plantation owner, boss, who gives them the economic blah blah. Now you know there is crisis on the market, I should lower your wages and so on and so on. And they don't want to listen to it. They say, wait, but our children are starving and so on and so on. And then workers insist. The boss, the owner, whatever, says, but listen, are you totally stupid? Don't you have ears to listen to me? Then comes this wonderful scene. One of the workers stepped forward, takes out a kind of a curved knife, cuts off his ear and gives it. Like, yes, we have ears, here is it. It's in a ridiculous way, a question, a nice gesture of liberation, I claim. It's kind of a, no, I don't have a ear, you can have it, the ear to listen to your bullshit, like, I am free to being an instrument of your dream, and so on and so on. Something similar happens to one of my favorite Hollywood films. Did you see Fight Club? You know that wonderful scene where, I always refer to it, when Ed Norton confronts his boss and in spite of beating the boss, beats him. I think that, now come I think I want to tell you my easy conclusion. This club of Kritika Polityczna here should be your fight club in this sense. That is to say, what we need now, and I think it's very wise that you started with this cultural work. I think that your motto could have been, you know what Freud put in his interpretation of dreams, that famous quote from Virgil Aeneid, if you cannot change the earth, acheronta movebo, the surface, move the underground. The first state of liberation is to change your dreams and so on. That's the most difficult thing to do. To change your ideological horizon and so on and so on. Not in this old orthodox communist sense, learn the truth. I mean, we have to work hard. We don't know simply what are the solutions and so on. We have to gain the breathing space, as it were. And this is how I see, which is why I totally supported the activity of these cells that you are organizing all around Poland. Simply, it's not for me in this stupid pragmatic sense like the education today. I don't know if you are in the same sheet as we are in Slovenia, the horror of so-called Bologna educational reform, which means for me real socialism revived. I don't know how it's what with you. In ex-Yugoslavia, the last attempt of communists to cling to power was to reform education. Their idea was social sciences are the origin of all evil, so let's get education which serves the needs of society, which is subordinated to economic other needs. Let's cut off all the surplus, which is exactly what it is going now. Peter Sloterdijk, who definitely is not a leftist, my friend, told me that even in philosophy there is now pressure like this. They claim we give you money, but you must also look for connections with business and sort of like ask them to do what. They claim like, why don't you go to some top managers and offer to explain to them like a Schnellkurs, as we put it, quick course into what is postmodernism, where are we today, you know, a kind of a quick, as the communists would have put it, quick indoctrination, basis of Marxism or whatever you call it today. Especially in this era, I think what I like, if I got it correctly, is that precisely you are not here doing things which simply serve some purpose. What is truly subversive today is to do things which do not serve anything, not because they are useless, but because what we have to do today is precisely, how should I put it, to redefine what are our purposes. We don't know. It's not so clear how to move, what to do, and so on. Which is why, as I already said the last time I was not here, but in Poland, as a Marxist, I say today maybe it's a time, if you want really to be Marxist, to turn around that famous 11th thesis. You know, philosophers have only interpreted the world, now we have to change it. Maybe in the 20th century we tried too much just to change the world. The time has come to interpret it again. And this is for me the truly subversive aspect of what you are doing it now, precisely insofar with this wise distance towards immediate ideological engagement, this clarifying the field, moving the underground before you will move it up there. And in this way, you know that wonderful Hegelian metaphor of mole, that you do the underground, and then after your work is done, you just call the master idiot, look down, and he collapses. No? All the luck. Okay, thank you.
How many questions we have? Please raise your hands. Many. Come on. Okay, so you can choose someone.
No, you choose. I don't want to. Okay. Because when I choose, I'm always accused of, you know, if I choose from here, I'm a left winger, if there, I'm a right winger.
Okay, I can start. Well, I'm not sure if you've seen the poster for this presentation.
I saw, but I quickly...
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. It contains some keywords like love, revolution, utopia, whereas your lecture was centered around ideology, and I wanted to ask if you could, in 5 sentences, connect the keywords that actually brought us here with your lecture.
Or let me add to it. Do you think that utopia is the last, or the love is the last utopia in the post-ideological times?
No, what I see, I will be really short this time. First, I must apologize for the title. It's simply that because of some miscommunication, we were not able to...
There is no miscommunication about it, just answer.
This is what I like. There's still Stalin's spirit is alive. Okay. No, what I wanted to say is that he invented the title in a very correct way. But I can give you a clue of how to connect things. Utopia, it's clear. My thesis is that the true utopia were the 90s. The true utopians are not those who think about a change, are those who think liberal democratic capitalism is the answer. That's my point, critical notion. So when people call us utopians, our answer should be, no, sorry, you are the utopian. Love revolution, very simple. The connection is, here comes my evil atheist Christianity. You know, my Christ is the Christ who says, I bring sword, not love. If you do not hate your father and mother, you are not one of. You don't have a sword, sell everything you have to buy a sword, and so on and so on. The problem is how to read this. Not in any pseudo-dialectical sense, like, you know, as some of my theological friends do it, and I think they are obscene pagans. Like, mostly they tell me, you know, you shouldn't take that literally. It only means not really that you hate your father, but like, you should love them, but not exclusively. Love me more. But this is an obscenity, as if God is some jealous guy who, you know, I allow you to love people around, but just love me a little bit. No, the problem is to get in what sense the violence, which is obvious here in Christ's works, is not a dialectical counterpoint of love, but is the actuality of love itself. It's what makes it real love, not imaginary infatuation. And I claim that the key third term here is Holy Ghost, as an emancipatory community, as opposed to social hierarchy and so on, because I claim that the way to read those, if you do not hate your mother, father, it doesn't mean then as others, persons. It means then precisely as mother, father, which means elements in social hierarchy. So we are back at the problem of emancipatory collective and so on and so on. Stop it. You see, I can do it.
Question here.
All right.
I'm sorry.
I have a question about what you have said about the films about nature and the films, the gonzos, the
Yeah. Oh my God, that's nice.
yeah. I just recently have seen Grizzly Man, the documentary by Van Herzog. I didn't see it all, but
oh my God, sorry, which one?
Grizzly Man.
I'm sorry,
You didn't. Well,
although I like his documentaries,
well,
the last one I've seen is 10 years ago. Did you see the one about Kuwait burning the...
Yeah, of course, yeah. But also, there was the one about penguins. And my impression on documentaries about Herzog is that he makes a lot about suicide. That's his main theme in the recent documentaries. But Grizzly is also about the man who goes lives with the grizzlies, and then he goes. It's a real story.
He gets almost eaten by pigs.
Yeah, he gets eaten, right? But the thing is that I'm asking, why do you think? Why is it so that the death films can be seen without any mask, and they are very beautiful?
Sorry, without any?
Without any. What you said about the camera, the pornography films, yeah. Right? That they are too close. The objects are too close. Yeah. Whether when you watch those documentaries, the guy who shot, himself being, eaten by, it's immense beauty. It's so pure and beautiful. And I'm asking, why do you think that? Those films, the death films, can be seen without any narrative, almost as if death was narrative. And my kind of, I asked for it because, of course, about spirituality, right? I think it could confirm that we sense some sort of spirituality connected with just some sort of, other life, and would you agree with that? That's one question. And the other question is about changing dreams. I find it very interesting because I'm practicing the yoga, dream yoga.
Yeah.
And just what you think about this sort of practice.
Okay, the first one, I haven't thought about it, I don't want to bluff now too much, but what you said is, I think, is deeply correct, namely, the big mystery is for me effectively this one. Remember, for example, when you see a scene of murder and so on, the so-called snuff films, the dirtiest pornography, or not even where simply you see real torture, murder, and so on. Why doesn't this one work as a snuff film? It's not enough to say, but nobody is torturing, is he himself, no? This is maybe, I think, I don't have, I would have to see it, I don't have, maybe it is something, maybe it is crucial that he is doing it himself. I think it wouldn't have worked if another guy were to shoot that.
Suicide,
then you would have, suicide. Yeah. Then you would have all these false solutions, but fuck you, why don't you go then jump and save the guy? How can you shoot him and so on? But you in Poland have here a similar tradition of this. Do you remember your great, from socialist times, spectacle, I think Alexander Ford, I'm not sure, Pharaoh?
Yeah.
There is a scene there where this is what I repress, because Kavalerovich, if I know it correctly, is an ultra-opportunist. At that time he was making communist movies, then he made one of the movies which maybe Hitler was right, should be burned alive, Quo Vadis, which I think is really bad. So but okay, you remember there is a scene there that a horse is hit by some spears, and then you learn learn after he's hit a couple of times that they're really killing a horse. And I remember some spectators were shocked and so on. This incidentally, here we would have to rejoin all this Buddhist, Lacanian problematic on, yoga on identification and so on. Here we can see how much more fragile and delicate the so-called identification in cinema is. Even when you cry, you are not stupidly directly identified. You cry precisely because you know it's a fiction. You know what I mean? So when you see sex, when you see killing, it's part of your identification that you know it's not for the real. Let's say you tremble in a thriller, somebody is killing a person there. But the moment you suspect, my God, but he's really killing him or her, it would totally disrupt the identification. And again, I totally agree with you. I think it's something about suicide in the sense that it's not imposed brutally from outside. That in a way, maybe it has even to do something with dream. You know what's my idea? I cannot develop it now, it's much more complex, psychoanalytic, that the true magic and mystery of the movies is not to stage reality, so that really it's a fake, but you think it's reality. No, it's to present a reality which functions as a dream, to make reality itself dreamlike. And something like that should have happened there. You are not horrified, it's beautiful, because although it's reality, it's in a way subjectivized. And that's for me, movie, film, art at its best. You know which example I use in one of my past talks? I don't think I sold this bullshit here in Poland. You remember Kieślowski short film of love? There are some moments when she, the femme fatale, Grażyna Szapolowska or what, she goes to the post office, and then, although it's a very vulgar conversation about money and so on, it's done so that she is in front of that glass office, and then you have a strange effect of, you see her, you see the reflection on the glass of another face, and all of a sudden it becomes a phantasmatic, dreamy situation. Although it's nothing, but this is the movie at its best.
That's Kieślowski's those films, you know, the film o zabijaniu and the Decalogue. They have many of those movies.
And do you agree or not that the big catastrophe of Kieślowski, and don't misunderstand, I don't mean socialism was good, was freedom, yes. Like too much freedom and so on, and then he became obsessed with beautiful women in the West, shooting them half naked, and everything was open. If you ask me, the best Kieślowski is, how do you call it, Blind Chance, Street Paddock. That's the ultimate. Which one?
Documentaries.
I haven't yet seen them, I'm too shocked by them. I'm afraid. I wrote about them, I read about them, but I'm afraid. Because the one I like is, after reading about it, I read about it, wrote about it, I don't want to see it. I'm a philosopher, I don't need reality. Is that Confessions of a Night Portrait. Yeah, because it's again this how you see, the lesson is for me one of the lessons, a very simple one. He knew in advance why this reality TV is bullshit. Because in reality, we are not what we are. We play the role of ourselves. You can see the guy, how our reality, how to put it, in real life we play the fiction of ourselves. And it's wonder, no, they must be the best, I bought them, but I'm afraid to. There are movies, I'm afraid that it will affect me too much.
That's why I didn't see Christmas, because it's beautiful. But you might...
Do you have another question?
Other question? Jest pytanie.
Kopiesz?
Nie, Marta. Puśćcie dalej.
As I understood your last sentence, it was we should to emancipate. We should first emancipate our dreams. Yes.
More. Yes. No, I don't want to get caught into debate on what do I mean by emancipation and so on.
Okay.
But yes,
from from perspective of left activists. I can say that I'm from this perspective. I would like to say that I think the problem is that activists' dreams, the dream of the activists is revolution, and we all know that the reality is bad, yes, and we are dreaming about revolution and the new society. And if we emancipate from this dream, yeah, from this revolution, so what we should do, in fact, yeah, to
precisely.
go further.
That would be my point. The first, you know, like I would question very much. Here I'm a true dream Stalinist, because I put it. No, what I would like to have a nice KGB look into your dreams of revolution. No, are they really as revolutionary as you think? Because if there is a lesson of 20th century, it's to what extent. Precisely when you think you are subversive and so on, you just reproduce in a displaced way the previous society and so on and so on. Like, was Stalin's dream really so revolutionary? For me, what gives you an indication is that wonderful in a terrifying sense. But you know, when Stalin was asked, I think in the late 20s, early 30s, what is the ideal Bolshevik? He said it's a combination between this Russian fanaticism and American pragmatic spirit and so on. For example, it's a key component of the Stalinist, already in the 20s, Soviet dream to, at the level of industrialization, to, how should I put it, be more American than Americans themselves. And don't misunderstand me. I'm not now trying to say this ideological pseudo-leftist bullshit that this means United States are even guilty for Stalinism or whatever. What I'm saying is that, do you know that, for example, in the 1920s, Henry Ford, and all they knew about him was this serial production of cars, machines, was considered a half-god in Soviet Union. Was the absolutely mythic figure, and so on and so on. You know, this tells a lot about their dreams. If you want to look at the underlying Soviet dream, I only know the German version. The guy whom I don't quite trust, he needs a re-education camp, but he can be interesting. The German-Russian art theorist Boris Groys. He published with Zurkamp, I only know it in German, 2 volumes, 1,000 pages, about this Soviet technological gnosis from 1920s. And some big writers are part of it, like Andrei Platonov, and so on. You know, there was an incredible utopian explosion from 1918 till like 26-7. The idea was they should really, communists, create a new man. And they meant it in a brutally direct way. A man who would be, that's of course, as it's always with Gnostic utopias, the first thing is no sexuality, no? It should be asexual, totally spiritual, and at the same time totally material and all that stuff. And it was an incredible dream. And now I will answer you if your idea would be, okay, I'm talking about a couple of maniacs. No, I'm talking of hundreds of thousands. This was an incredible phenomenon. So, and that's the point in my book, which you translated, I think, Defense of Lost Causes, where I have that provocative title, How Did Stalin Save the Humanity of Man, or what, no? My point is that Stalinism was paradoxically, in a way, a return to brutal normality, renouncing that excessive dream. Because the part of that dream was, for example, to overcome morality. The idea was kind of a perfect Nietzschean, we will become spiritualized, but at the same time totally automatized. So part of this dream was the idea that in communist society you would no longer have to cry or display emotions, but there will be simply machines which will register your satisfaction and dissatisfaction. So no longer need for this. Stalinism, in a way, I claim, was a perverse return to normality, which also answers another question which is deeply neglected. You know, the idea that you get from crazy avant-gardists is that in 20s, all well happy, avant-garde, enjoying Malevich and Eisenstein, and then brutal Stalin came and imposed socialist realism. The true story is that it's very sad that basically the people were fed up with these stupid formalist and so on futurist experiments. Like Eisenstein, even his greatest hit, as it were, at that time, Potemkin, no? You know that? It was just shown for 2 weeks in a Moscow suburban theater. Nobody wants to saw that. People, and Stalin, he had a stroke of genius there. Stalin first first prohibited all other artistic schools, allowing only that, how's it called, that RAP or what? Russian Association of RAP, that Russian Association of Proletarian Satellite Writers. And then he said, even they had to go, we will have socialist realism. And everyone was enthusiastic. We get rid of those proletarian fanatics, we return to 19th century, great realism, and it was immensely popular. Because what Stalin promised to people was enough of this stupid either proletarian sectarianism or futurist experiments. You will finally get, you know, as precisely, we are coming back to the topic, people with ordinary dreams. You will be able to cry, to sympathize, and so on and so on. So, in this sense, you know, Stalinism was not, as people claim, a totally crazy dream. It was a much more complex phenomenon. But then going back to what you said, I'm not saying now literally that, you know, you should lock yourself into a room and somehow symbolically torture yourself, your dreams. What I'm saying that you should just always be aware that your dreams are in some way part of a society which, in a way, some way they oppose. That they are also structured by this, so that even if your revolution ends well, its first victim will be your dreams about it. You never get what you dream about. And my final cynical conclusion, that's good, because realized dream is a nightmare. It's the definition of realized dream. So again, don't worry about it. Do it. I'll put it in a more cynical way. If you are an activist, just do it. Don't be afraid. The dreams will catch you and change themselves, you know. Don't worry too much about it.
All right.
Any other questions? Proszę Państwa, proszę się nie bać dać po polsku, w razie czego możemy przetłumaczyć.
So let's have a last question.
Jest pytanie, proszę bardzo. Proszę Pana. Tylko proszę podać mikrofon, jeśli można. Poda się? Okay.
Well, you gave us many examples of ideologies, but can we honestly be sure, can we say that there are any experiences left that in our culture that are not ideological?
Absolutely. No. I'm sorry that I didn't have time for everything, but my thesis is absolutely not this kind of postmodern thesis, you know. And, like, to cut it short, but some people put it like this, even direct, like, everything is ideology, ideological fiction, and the greatest ideology is the very idea that we can step outside ideology. Like the ultimate ideology is the ideology of... No, just we have to be very precise. Where do we find this non-ideology? We don't... I'm so sad I didn't have time to develop it. First, in the opposition between fiction and reality. For me, ideology is on the side of reality, not fiction. I didn't have time to develop it, but for me, ideology is not, oh, you are just dreaming, and so on. Ideology is the way our social reality itself is structured, which means, next step, how to put it, this also complicates immensely the problem of belief. I think that, you know, people usually say we live in a godless era, we don't believe. I claim we believe more than ever today. Only our beliefs are, how should I put it, objectified. They circulate as, the form of belief today is what? Did you see the movie Kung Fu Panda? Yeah. This is for me the greatest ideological mystification of Hollywood recently. Why? Because did you notice something strange? You know the story, cartoon of a big fat panda who wants to become a Kung Fu warrior. First, the movie mobilizes all that Western Buddhist, Orientalist bullshit, you know, Kung Fu, fate, destiny, heroism, sacrifice, discipline. At the same time, if you saw the movie, it makes fun of this all the time. It mocks itself with common sense. But the mystery is that in spite of all this mocking, ideology functions. And this is a lesson for today. This is the question. And you know, beliefs are something so mysterious. To conclude, really, let me give you a wonderful example. Recently, a friend sent me a book from Brazil about something incredible. Brazil had in 1945 a strong Japanese community of around 300,000. Okay. Then there was the Japanese surrender in August or when. You know what happened there? Half, a little bit over half of the Japanese community did not believe that Japan really lost the war. So they claimed this is just American propaganda to avoid their humiliation. And they claimed that in reality America lost. America had to give the whole Pacific to Asian Pacific to Japan, and they even went so far as to falsify special issues of New York Times, where you have the front with, of course, a photo montage, General MacArthur bowing to the Japanese emperor and sighing the American defeat. Now this is something mysterious. Why? Because the same people, they were ready to die for this. There was almost a war. Hundreds died. A civil war within the Japanese community. But those who were ready to die for this fiction, wait a minute, they were the authors of this fiction. You know what I mean? Like, you can have a belief which you consciously fabricated, but still you believe in it. Belief is something much more mysterious than we think, I claim. We have also beliefs, okay, my old example to stop. You know, take, how do you call it, that idiot who appears pedophile at the end of each year, Santa Claus, or how do you call it? Okay. If you ask parents, they will tell you, I'm not crazy. My God, of course I don't believe in it, I just pretend because of the children, because I have to buy the presents. Okay, you ask the children. They will tell you, of course I don't believe in it. I pretend so that I get presents and not to hurt my parents. And so on and so on. So the point is, nobody believes in it. But it functions as a belief structuring the social field. My point is simply that that's how democracy and similar bullshit functions. Nobody believes. You know who was the first to provide the formula of this? Golda Meir, you know, the Israeli politician. When she was asked, do you believe in God? She gave a simple answer. I believe in Jewish people and Jewish people believe in God. It was a clear way to say, I don't, but because the point is not the stupid Stalinist one, which is that, you know, we have to pretend to believe because of the ordinary people. I claim she was more refined and cynical, as we are today. The idea is there doesn't have to be anyone who in first person believes, and belief can still function. And I claim, the last conclusion from here, that maybe the belief that we know today as, you know, this first person, shoot me, I believe, is something pretty modern. Maybe I tend to think, from what I know modestly, that it started somewhere with Protestantism and so on. That before, like I mention it often, do you know the book, it must be translated with you, that wonderful book by the French historian Paul Veyne, wonderful title, Did the Ancient Greeks Believe in Their Myths? It's a wonderful book which analyzes it and claims, of course, they were not idiots. When they say gods dwell on Mount Olympus, they did not think if you climb this empirical mountain you will encounter there Zeus playing with Aphrodite or whatever. But nonetheless, he claims it's also wrong to read it as just a metaphor, you know, in this enlightened way. Oh, Zeus was for them only a metaphor for a high natural force, whatever. No, it was something much more mysterious. I think, following Paul Veyne, that the model is a similar one, I repeat an old joke, I know, I'm sorry, like politeness, you know, we meet, I tell you, sorry, don't take it personally again, I tell you, nice to see you, how are you? We both know I'm lying. I hate, not literally, I hate to see you and I don't care if you drop dead tomorrow, no? But even if this is true, it's still, we both know it's like this. Okay, not with you, but when I meet a guy whom I barely know, but nonetheless, it doesn't make it simply hypocritical. It's something that I cannot but call a sincere lie, as they put it, you know, because a proof, if I ask you, how are you? If you were to suspect that I mean it seriously, you would have the full right to tell me, fuck off, it's not of your business how I am. You know what I mean? It doesn't literally, as to psychology, it's a fake, but still it is sincere. It's not, because, and people who don't get it are called psychotics. Yeah. This is typical psychosis where they catch you. Why? My son was a little bit like that. Why are you saying this when obviously it's not true? What can I tell him? Because I belong to culture or whatever, because I'm not an animal, whatever. But okay, I didn't answer your question, which would be, there can be a fiction which is, ideology is not the same as fiction. I measure ideology in the very formal Marxist way. You have a central social antagonism, lie, contradiction, whatever. Ideology is something which in some way disavows, mystifies that antagonism. Which is why, paradoxically, for me, this is what I would like to emphasize. Ideology has nothing to do with this naive truth or falsity. You can, let me give you a nice example from psychoanalysis. And I would have to apply to society, but not now, otherwise you would have really killed me. This is the difference between hysteria and obsession. A hysterical subject tells the truth in the form of a lie. You lie, literally, as to the truth value, but that lie itself articulates some authentic psychic reality. While an obsessional, and I know it, I am one, lies in the form of truth. What you say you took care is literally true. But, you know, it serves a false, for example, a simple example. Let's say a Jew effectively robs someone and steals your money, whatever. If a Nazi says it publicly, it is literally true, but it serves a lie. It's a lie. So it's crucial, this would be the beginning, I don't have time now to fully answering you. I'm very precise here, you know, don't confuse the question of ideology with this boring topic of can we ever arrive at the truth, you know, ultimate truth and so on. The question of ideology is not that, it's subjective, not in the sense of subjectivism, but in the sense of is it true or not with regard to your subjective position. Which is why, again, as I said, apropos of the Jews, we should apply on them, my old topic, Lacan's wonderful statement that, a little bit male chauvinist, that when a guy is pathologically jealous of his wife, obsessed by that she sleeps around with other men, even if it is totally true that she does it, his jealousy is still pathological. Because, no, the point is not about truth or not. The point is how is, as I would have put it, he in this dream. Why does he, for his subjective consistency, need that image of a wife who cheats him all the time, and so on and so on? This, so, in a brutal, abstract comparison, in this sense, his jealousy is ideological, even if it happens to be true. I'm too long. Your patience. Next time, I promise you, if I will be still allowed, I will be still your central committee judgment or whatever. No, I know what I will get tomorrow from you. You know, this kind of a Stalinist, a short report on some serious ideological mistake by Comrade Slavoj or whatever. If I'm allowed here, I promise you two things: I will be shorter and I will be better at following the title. It will be more consistent. Thank you very much.
Dziękujemy bardzo Państwu za przyjście. Obiecujemy, że to nie ostatnie spotkanie. Część z wymienionych osób w wykładzie, właściwie w całym wykładzie profesora Žižka odwiedzi nas. To będzie na pewno Peter Stotterwijk, któremu wydajemy książkę, który przyjedzie, to będzie na pewno Jacques Rancière, na pewno Babler. Myślę, że też że będzie tu ciekawe, więc zapraszam Państwa na wszystkie imprezy do Świetlicy Trójmiejskiej.
Come to Sloterdijk. He's intelligent right-winger. You know his basic idea, I love it. In the 20th century we thought the poor uniting themselves can save the world. Today it's clear only the very rich can save the world. Can you imagine how? No, but again, he's a perfect guy with whom, although you don't agree with the word, you find it absolutely fascinating. He's much more interesting than the boring idiots with whose every word you agree, but then you say, so what? No.